Helpers follow directions. Leaders build people. Helpers execute tasks. Leaders create vision. Helpers avoid conflict. Leaders embrace confrontation. Leadership is not found in your presence, it's found in your absence. Promise you, if you are afraid of confrontation, you're not leading, you're babysitting. If you don't confront culture or character within 24 hours, you are saying, I'm okay with this being reproduced in my culture. Leaders take responsibility, they don't wait for permission. I say this all the time on this podcast. Leaders don't need permission to lead. Leaders have vision, helpers just follow plans. If you can't see the future, you can't lead people into it. Leaders hold themselves accountable first, and leaders lead without titles. Are you actually leading, or are you just helping? Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. This week we're going to be talking about this. Stop helping and start leading. I want to give you a few thoughts on how you should actually be leading in 2025. I think this translates to your business. I think this translates to your church, your team, your marriage. And I want to honestly compare and contrast the difference between a helper and a leader. I do think there is a ton of helpers on the planet. I think there's people who want to be of help. There's people who want to just spectate instead of participate. But the reality is most people like the idea of leadership, but they're not really leading. They're just helping. They show up, they assist, they support, but they don't actually lead. And to be honest, it's easier. Helping is safe. Leadership's costly. Helpers follow directions. Leaders build people. Helpers execute tasks. Leaders create vision. Helpers avoid conflict. Leaders embrace confrontation. If you want to actually lead in 2025, it's time to step up. No more playing it safe. No more sitting in the background. No more waiting for permission. This episode, I promise you, is going to show you how to move from being a helper to being a real leader. I always want to caveat this. These are just my thoughts. I'm just submitting these thoughts to you as a person who leads in an organization that my wife and I have roughly 150 to 200 people who report to us. I'm a part of an influencer agency startup. I work with high-level talent as far as creative vision and all of that world. So this is just my observations of people and honestly my own journey of going, man, there's been moments in my life where I felt like I was a leader. And then there's also moments in hindsight where I said, I wasn't leading, I was helping. And helping isn't bad, by the way. It just goes back to, are we actually going to be honest? So I'm going to give you, again, thoughts. I'm going to submit these to you. And the first thought is this. Leaders build people. Helpers just do tasks. If all you do is execute orders, you're not a leader, you're a helper. See, the difference is a helper practically just does tasks. It translates to potentially even using people to do tasks. We would say as a manager. Manager is just another word for helper. They're trying to help the CEO. They're trying to help the store manager execute. And again, that's fine, but you're not a leader, because if all you do is just execute, you're not a leader. Leaders build people. Leaders develop people to think, problem solve, and take initiative. So instead of you just running and doing a task, the difference is you involving somebody in it, and not so that they would just do it so you don't want to do it. It's to build them as a person. It's always using the language, hey, on the other side of us doing this, on the other side of us doing blank, you're going to see this. And to me, that is a leader. So my question to you is, are you leading your team, or are you just keeping them busy? And busyness is not healthy. You just telling them to do things that don't translate to growth. You telling them to do things that, again, you're just dumping on them, not delegating. It's not fruitful, and it's not a life that anybody wants to live. And to be honest, if you want to have the A-list incredible leaders, the cream de la cream, or creme de la creme, however you say it, If you want those type of people, you need to view them as leaders and not helpers. And they're not just there to support your mission. They're there so that you can build them into whatever God has called them to be. So some introspective questions I'm going to submit to you is, do I empower people to make decisions, or do I micromanage every step? There has to be a moment in your leadership journey where you understand you have to trust people. A leader who does not trust people will not be a leader for long, because we have to understand that empowering somebody means that I'm empowering you to ideate and execute, not just execute. Managers only focus on that part, that their job is to do your vision. The difference is leaders help other people have vision. This is a clear example. We try to plan 3 to 6 months out of any of our basic events around our church. For me, it's important to have the calendar, the framework executed and set forth so that our directors and team leaders can look at the calendar and start to ideate. Maybe it's a Christmas. They know Christmas is coming in December. I want the creative team to ideate and to brainstorm and come to me with 5 ideas, not do this idea. That's the difference here of a helper and a leader. So do I empower people to make decisions, or do I micromanage every step? Am I actively developing my team's leadership, or just using them to complete tasks? Everything you do, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, should be about developing people. Every single interaction, every single text message, every single conversation you have with your spouse and your children is all about, I love you so much. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to build you. I'm going to listen to you, because leaders are listeners. So that's what this is all about. That's what church is about, is developing people. Another word for development is just discipleship. I'm discipling you by building your life, helping you build your life, helping you be self-dependent of reading God's word and prayer, not just podcasts and preaching. Again, those are just basic things that, again, you're not just doing tasks. Yes, we all have jobs to do and responsibilities. All of that is absolutely important if you can attach it to a person. I always like to say this: I will never ask you to do something that doesn't add value or inherently make a difference in somebody's life. It could be your life, it could be somebody else's life, it could be a team member's life, but it's going to impact somebody else. Because if it's not attached to a person, I don't want to do it. It's a waste of time. Third question for this point is, if I stepped away today, would my team still function effectively? See, this one gets you, because leadership is not found in your presence, it's found in your absence. So you being gone, and I'm not saying for a Sunday, I'm saying for a month, for 6 months. If you were not there, would the people you're currently leading thrive or be dependent on you? Because that tells me whether or not you've built leaders, because leaders bring up solutions, leaders ideate, leaders dream. And we'll talk about all of that in a moment. But the reality is your team should be able to function without you. One of the greatest principles you and I can gather and receive and accept is we are replaceable. You are not irreplaceable. You are absolutely replaceable. I'm replaceable. Your lead pastor is replaceable. Your team leader is replaceable. And that is awesome. I love the fact that I am replaceable, because that means it's not dependent on me, that I'm not the main subject here. Jesus is. And Jesus and his bride have been around longer than all of us have been alive, which tells me that somebody else is coming down the road and somebody else is leaving. And that's okay. We just have to be aware of our season and our moment. So leaders build people, helpers just do tasks. Second thought, leaders confront problems, helpers avoid them. Weak leaders see problems and say nothing. I promise you, if you are afraid of confrontation, you're not leading, you're babysitting. And there just tends to be a sense of parenting and babysitting. There is a difference, because I'm not a babysitter of my son. I am his parent. Yes, he's 6 weeks old, so there's not a lot of confrontation happening. But just go with me for a moment. When he's 10 years old, I'm not dependent of the babysitter to confront my son. I'm not dependent on the teacher to confront the negative patterns in my son's life, the character problems. I'm going to confront that. Why? Because I'm responsible for building him. At some point, he's going to leave our house. He's going to graduate high school. He's going to go to college or start a business or get a job. And in that moment, you're going to look back in the last 18 years and go, did my parents develop me? Development happens through confrontation and affirmation. You correct them, you celebrate them. You speak to something, you don't. And the things that you don't speak to, you're saying you are tolerating that, which will be reproduced in your culture. So the things that you create and tolerate are 100% facilitating the culture in which you are allowing. So if somebody's being treated poorly and you don't confront that, you're saying, I'm okay with people being treated poorly. We would never say that. We would never put that in a book. We would never put that on a wall in our church. But the reality is if you don't speak to it, you don't confront it, you're babysitting it. And a babysitter is just there for a couple hours. So the actual people can go on a date, or they have a meeting, or maybe they are traveling. But at the end of the day, the leader's always going to come back. The parent's always going to come back. So you can either be a parent or a babysitter. I'm submitting to you, you're a leader, and leaders absolutely have to confront. Confrontation, in my opinion, has an expiration. If you don't confront culture or character within 24 hours, you are saying, I'm okay with this being reproduced in my culture. And to me, that's the difference between an excellent culture and a mediocre culture. A healthy culture confronts the negative patterns, not confronts the person inherently. You're confronting the pattern, because we follow purpose, not potential. We follow patterns, not potential. So if somebody has a pattern of something, that means that is directly attached to their current context. And me, that's a big deal. Like I said, culture is built by what you create and what you tolerate. So confrontation has an expiration. Be okay with a short-term offense. Be okay with short-term emotions. You can always tell, by the way, a strong leader versus a weak leader or a helper in this context by the way they receive feedback. Receiving feedback tells me more about what type of a leader you are than the way you give feedback. Because us giving feedback, to be honest, is easy. It's always easier to point somebody else's problems out. It's a lot harder to look at my own. And when somebody speaks to it, am I humble? Am I just saying, yep, absolutely? And again, it all comes back to the spirit in which somebody's confronting you 100%. Don't be mean, don't be angry, don't be rude. Do things with grace and with truth. So here's some questions for you about confrontation. When was the last time I had a difficult but necessary conversation? And again, we just have to get over this concept of I want people to like me. You will struggle in the leadership journey of building something that actually matters, having that filter as your primary focus. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying if the primary focus of every day is I want people to like me, you are going to accept things that somebody else would have never accepted in their culture. Never would have accepted that pattern, never would have accepted that sin. Because at the end of the day, what we don't confront, we are saying we're willing to tolerate. And to me, I don't tolerate sin. I don't tolerate treating people poorly. I don't tolerate a lack of excellence. Mediocrity honors God's house. And again, that's just convictions we have that, hey, if this happened once, that's okay. If it happens twice, that means that we're not actually leading. Because the tension point of one mistake to the second of the same mistake, that tells me that we're not receiving quality feedback. Am I avoiding confrontation because I want people to like me? We see this a ton in leadership, especially in the church, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily inherently bad. Most of the time, in my observation, is usually because people really do have big hearts. They really do love people. They really do invest a ton in people. And again, they mean well. They just have not been led well to understand I don't actually love you until I have a moment of risking the relationship. I'm risking the relationship by confronting a pattern, or the way you talk to your wife in front of me, or the way you parented your kid, and me just giving honest observations. That doesn't mean that it's an absolute truth. Sin is obviously an absolute truth. If you're doing something that's sinful, it's sinful. There's no gray area that it's black or white. But there are patterns, and I would just submit to you or recommend to you, it's important to have language to that. I always like to say, here's what I'm seeing. If you say, here's what I'm seeing, and just lay it out, what you're doing is you're connecting a bridge to potentially it's just your perception and you're wrong. And that's okay. But you're giving them space to give feedback, or, you know what, you are right. That is something that I do that I didn't notice, or that's something in my character that I do show up late all the time. I'm so sorry. Hey, that's okay. I just saw it. I spoke to it, and let's make sure to be here on time. And the other side is intend and impact. Now this one is great language. You say, hey, I know you didn't intend to do this, but this is how it impacted our organization. This is how it impacted our team. Hey, I know you didn't intend to show up late, but when you did, it impacted us this way, blank. And that just gives great language instead of pointing fingers, being rude and abrasive. We don't want to do that. So are you avoiding confrontation because you want people to like you? Last question on this one. Do I allow dysfunction to continue because it's easier than addressing it? A lot of times the easy way is not the way we should go, the right way. The right way sometimes is taking the long road. The right way sometimes is risking the relationship. The right way is understanding what I'm a part of is bigger than the part I play. A lot of times in the local church context that I've ever been around, the hundreds of people I've talked to across the world, there tends to be a back-end agenda of saying what the part I'm playing is a bigger than what we're a part of. That to me is pride. That to me is ego. And that to me is worshiping yourself and your potential and your purpose. God did give you plans to prosper you and to build you up to be the man of God, 100%. But he will not do that in isolation. Isolation, honestly, leads to deprivation. It leads to being a person who had this someday syndrome that, hey man, someday we're going to do this, or I'm going to do this. It's not ever going to happen unless it's attached to people. And building people will help you have a bigger world instead of having the world build you. You want to continue to build people, confront patterns so that people can live in their potential. Next one, leaders make decisions. Helpers wait for instructions. If you're waiting to be told what to do, you're a helper, not a leader. Leaders see problems. One of my favorite things to do in the lobby, outside, in the auditorium, in our church, is to look at people's eyes. I'm always, even in the middle of worship, I'm always looking to see who else around the room is looking. And a lot of times, yes, we're being present, we're being in the moment, but leaders always tend to have eyes that are looking to see problems, looking that the drape is off, looking to see that there's something on the ground, looking about the transition in service that wasn't great. To me, that's somebody who sees problems, but you know they see solutions. I'm always looking for people's eyes. I'm always looking for on staff calls when somebody offers solutions, or like I said at the beginning, looks at a calendar and offers ideas and vision, not just wanting vision. You're waiting to be told what to do. You're a helper, not a leader. Leaders take responsibility. They don't wait for permission. I say this all the time on this podcast. Leaders don't need permission to lead because it's in you, and what's in you will come out of you. I'm a leader. Every single conversation I'm in, every single Slack DM I'm in, every single organization I work with, it's just in me. I'm a leader. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give feedback. I'm going to give critical feedback on myself of, hey, I don't know if I'm needed in this conversation. I feel like I'm in the way. I feel like I'm the lid to you. And again, I want to take responsibility. I want to take ownership. And we got a lot of vision helpers in the church. The people just want to help out. People want to feel like they're part of a winning team. And that's okay. Again, 100% okay. But for leaders, we don't just have responsibilities, we take responsibilities. And that to me is the difference between somebody who's just helping, that they're just helping you do tasks, or leaders, they take responsibility. Your team needs somebody who can set direction and make tough calls. Leaders make decisions, and sometimes it's a hard decision. Sometimes it's cutting cost, a budget that you didn't want to. Sometimes it's canceling an event that felt like it was a fun event. And all those things are attached to people understanding I have to make hard decisions. It's just the way it is. Maybe you're wanting to go on another vacation and you're making a hard decision. We can't do it. We can't afford it. That's a decision. That's being a leader. And helpers wait for instructions. So some questions with this one. Do I wait for approval before taking initiative? You know you have the right leader when you don't have to motivate them. I don't have to motivate you to get on a meeting. I don't have to motivate you to get coffee with somebody in our church. You shouldn't have to wait for approval because you're not seeking approval for me. I want to know the results. Come to me with outcomes. Hey, I tried this and it didn't work. I love that. I will celebrate that every day of the week. Am I comfortable making tough decisions even when the outcome isn't guaranteed? There's a lot of faith that's attached to being a leader and making a difference. And I will always want to be a person who understands if I got to make the tough decision, I'm just going to own it. I'm going to live in it. I'm going to steward it. And I'm okay with people being offended or upset short term. Last question about this one. Is my team confident in my leadership, or do they sense hesitation? One of the best things and one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given is when I make a decision, be confident in that decision. Be confident in that decision, because people follow confident leaders more than they do competent leaders. You saying something insecure, people can sense that. People can smell that. And that's the gap of faith. That if you don't actually have faith that it's going to work out, there's always a hesitancy by your team. And you can sense that 100%. Last couple ones here. Leaders have vision. Helpers just follow plans. If you can't see the future, you can't lead people into it. You can't. You have to be a person who has vision. Even if you lead a coffee team in your church or you are a greeter, you having vision for that team, you having vision for the guests coming in, you having vision for that transition moment you're leading in worship, that's somebody who can lead people into that vision. Helpers follow roadmaps, leaders create them. Man, if there's one thing that I've learned in the last year of my life is how important me brainstorming is. Me sitting with a journal and writing thoughts down and coming up with new strategies and ideas and praying, because I believe the Holy Spirit will give you a better strategy than any church conference could. All that stuff's important. Books are important. Podcasts are important. You're listening to a podcast. But if you're listening to me more than you're listening to the Holy Spirit, you're not leading in the area you should be. If you don't have vision, you're just managing someone else's dream. And yes, you can have vision and still build someone else's dream. The trick is, I would never say yes to something that isn't also my dream. I believe in the local church. That's what my wife and I do. We build church. We build people in the church. So anything relevant to that, most of the time, I'm behind. We lived in California a year ago. We live in Phoenix right now because we planted and we're building a church. Because why? Yes, it was somebody else's dream, but I could see myself in that dream, which means I had vision for someone else's dream than my part. Where I go, man, I don't care what it takes. I want people in Central Phoenix to know Jesus. Therefore, I'm all in. Put me in, coach. I don't care where I'm at. I just want to make a difference and I want people to know him. So some questions around vision. Am I actively shaping the vision or just following what's already in place? Roadmaps are great. Conferences are great. Strategies are great that other people have. But are you just doing it because you think it's going to work? Or are you doing it because it's attached to your vision and sharpening your vision? Can I clearly articulate where I want my team to be in 6 months or a year? 4 words that'll change your leadership. One day we will. That to me speaks faith, that speaks confidence, and that speaks security. One of the biggest tension points in leadership in a church is you articulating strategy versus you articulating vision. Those are two things. Vision is when our eyes are closed, this is where we're going. Strategy is when our eyes are open, this is how we're going to get there. If you can articulate vision, honestly, the right leaders will come in and make sure the strategies happen. So are you articulating where you want them to be? Am I more focused on maintaining what exists rather than creating what's next? Leaders create. Christians create because we are made in God's image. And in the beginning, God created. For me and you, our life is built around creating. I'm creating leaders. I'm creating compassionate leaders. I'm creating a future for my family. I'm creating a future for generations to come in Phoenix. To me, that's somebody who's embodying being a leader. A leader creates. And not that you have to be creative. There's a difference between creating and being creative. Leaders take risks. Helpers stay comfortable. Safe leadership is not leadership. It's management. Growth requires risk. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not leading. Are you stretching yourself and your team, or are you just keeping things running? The mundane is okay, but also you have to understand taking a risk is a part of leadership. It might not mathematically make sense. It might economically not make sense or logically. That doesn't mean that God's hand isn't on it. If everyone in the Bible only did what made sense, you would have never seen half the miracles you see in the scriptures. It didn't make sense to build a boat. There's no rain. He took a risk and he built the boat. Helpers stay comfortable. It probably was expensive. Probably took a lot of time, like 120 years of his life, to do something that other people didn't understand. Took a risk. And when was the last time you took a leadership risk? Maybe it was on somebody. You took a risk. They didn't necessarily see it for themselves, but you threw them in a leadership role because you believed in them. That's a risk. Am I leading from faith or just maintaining what feels safe? Leadership is not about safety. Leadership potentially is about security, but it's also about leading from faith, not for faith. Do I challenge my team to take risks, or do I encourage them to play it safe? Our last couple here. Leaders don't need titles, they just lead. If you won't lead without a title, you're not a leader, you're an opportunist. Real leaders lead no matter their position, and leadership isn't about authority, it's about impact. I promise you, if you want influence in your context, if you want people to be bought into you, pour into them. Be confident, be faith-filled, continue to speak vision, no matter your position. I don't care if I'm in the parking lot, I'm speaking vision about that parking lot. There's going to be somebody getting saved in that parking lot because of our team, our leadership. So you got to make sure, again, you're not seeking position, because what will end up is your position will be your idol. Titles produce idols. Question to ask yourself: would I still lead with the same intensity if I had no title? Or would you find another church? Or would you find another job? If that's the case, you're in the wrong seat. Am I leading because I'm called or because I want recognition? You can either seek being seen or you can seek to serve. Both you can't do at the same time, because you can't serve somebody else and yourself at the same time. You can't serve your ambitions and love somebody inherently with no motives at the same time. Last question about titles. Do I measure my success by my title or my pay, or by the people I develop? You want to know the best resume is other people. If I'm interviewing a leader, if I'm interviewing somebody, I'm going to ask them, tell me about a story of somebody you built that's now leading in a high capacity, or building something else, or pioneering something else. Because if you can handle that, if you can handle that story, if you can give a resume of people, not a resume of positions, that to me is a leader. So my final challenge to you listening to this: are you leading or are you just helping? Leaders build people, helpers do tasks. Leaders confront problems, helpers avoid them. Leaders make decisions, helpers wait for instructions. Leaders have vision, helpers just follow plans. Leaders take risks, helpers stay comfortable. Leaders hold themselves accountable first, and leaders lead without titles. Are you actually leading, or are you just helping? This is the year to stop waiting and start leading. Step up, own your influence, and build people who build the future. We'll see you next week.